My dad left US with nothing. 20 years later, he came back asking for a kidney. I looked at the man in the hospital bed, his skin a sickly yellow, his hands trembling. The great Arthur Vance, reduced to a plea. "Lila, please," he whispered, his voice raspy. The doctor said, "I don't have much time. You're my only hope. We're a match." He reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. I just let his weak, cold fingers brush against mine. "A kidney," I said, my voice calm flat. "After 20 years. You vanish when I'm 8, leave Mom and me to drown in debt and grief. And now you find me because you need a part of me." A single tear traced a path through his stubble. It might have even been real. I was a different man then. "I'm so sorry, Lila. I'm your father." I leaned in close, so only he could hear. "I know exactly who you are. And I've been waiting for this moment for a very, very long time." His eyes widened. He saw something in my gaze then. Not anger, not hurt, but a cold, patient calculation. But that wasn't where it started. To understand why a daughter would look her dying father in the eye and plan her revenge, we have to rewind. You're probably wondering how it got this bad. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and drop where you're watching from. Because what comes next? You won't believe how justice turned the tables. My first memory is of my father's shoulders. I was 4, perched up high, king of the world, my small hands wrapped in his thick, dark hair. He smelled of sawdust and spearmint gum. He'd spin me around until the living room was a happy, dizzy blur, and my mother, Clara, would laugh from the kitchen, telling him he'd make me sick. He built things. Not just birdhouses or shelves, but dreams. He'd talk about Vance and Daughter Custom Woodworking, a shop with a big glass window, where people could watch us create magic. "It'll be ours, Lila Bug," he'd say, tucking me into bed. "Everything I do is for you. For this family." He always said trust was the foundation of everything. I didn't realize that foundations could be made of sand. The change was slow, like a stain spreading on wood. The laughter became less frequent. The sawdust smell was replaced by the sharp tang of whiskey. He'd come home late, his eyes distant, his pockets empty. My mother's face became a permanent canvas of worry. Then one Tuesday he didn't come home at all. We waited. The food grew cold. The phone rang and rang into a void. 3 days later a letter arrived. Not for my mom. For me. My 8-year-old hands tore it open. Inside was a crayon drawing I'd made of our family, with the words "I'm sorry" scrawled on the back in his frantic handwriting. That was it. No explanation. No money. Just a ghost, and a debt he'd hidden from us so deep it took our home. The years that followed were a blur of struggle. My mother worked 3 jobs, her spirit slowly breaking under the weight. I learned to be quiet, to be small, to not need anything. We were a unit of 2, bound by survival. I was 28, a paralegal, finally stable, when my mother passed. It wasn't a sudden tragedy, just a slow, tired giving out of a light that had been dimming for 2 decades. As I sorted through her things in our small apartment, I found a metal box tucked under her bed. Inside, nestled beside my childhood drawings, were documents. The final notice for the mortgage on our old house. Old bank statements with massive, suspicious withdrawals. And a single faded photo of my father, young and smiling, with a woman who wasn't my mother. On the back, an address was written in his hand. The betrayal wasn't a shock. It was a confirmation of a childhood fear. He hadn't just left. He had taken everything and started over somewhere else, with someone else. The grief and anger I'd carried for years hardened into something solid, something sharp. That's when I stopped being the abandoned daughter. I started taking notes. The address led me to a town 3 states over. With the skills I'd honed as a paralegal, I began to dig. It was like peeling back the layers of a rotten onion. Arthur Vance was now Art. He owned a successful home remodeling business. He had a new wife, a woman named Daphne, and a son Leo, who was about to turn 18. He lived in a beautiful suburban house with a perfectly manicured lawn. He'd built the life he'd promised us with someone else. I used a small private social media account to follow them. I saw the photos of family vacations, of Leo high school graduation, of my father older but healthy, smiling that same smile from my childhood. Every happy post was a fresh cut. I saved them all. I documented his business, his public persona. I found records of the LLC he'd formed just a year after he left us. I became an archaeologist of my own ruin. The symbolic object? That crayon drawing he'd sent me. I had it framed. I kept it on my desk, a constant reminder of the first lie. For a year, I just watched. I fantasized about confronting him, about exposing him to his new family. But it felt messy, emotional, uncontrolled. I wanted more than a scene. I wanted justice that mirrored the crime, a complete and total collapse. Then the midpoint mini-twist. The one he never saw coming. Through a contact at a medical records firm we sometimes used for legal cases, I discovered something. Arthur Vance was sick. Failing kidneys. He was on the transplant list, but his blood type was rare. His wife wasn't a match. His son Leo wasn't a match. But I knew I would be. I had my mother's old medical records. My blood type was the same as hers. And it was the same as his. He thought his biology was a death sentence. He didn't realize it was the key to the prison I was building for him. I made the first move. I sent a single email to his business account from an anonymous address. Mr. Vance, I understand you are in need of a kidney donor. I may be able to help. I am O-negative, a universal donor. I also know you have a past that you may not want your current family to know about. Let's talk. A life is a heavy price, but so is silence. The response was immediate, panicked. He agreed to meet, alone in a quiet park. Seeing him in person after 20 years was like looking at a ghost. He was thinner, paler than his online photos, but the eyes were the same. The fear in them was new though. Who are you? He demanded, his voice trembling. My name is Lila, I said, watching the name detonate behind his eyes. Clara's daughter. You remember Clara? The wife you bankrupted. The color drained from his face. Lila, my God. I thought. You thought we'd just disappeared? I finished for him. We did. Because of you. And now, you need something from the ghost you created. The power had flipped. And he could feel it. He tried to negotiate. He offered money. A one-time payment to make things right, and for me to get tested. This isn't about money, Arthur, I said, using his new name like a weapon. It's about truth. You get your tests. You confirm I'm a match. And in return, you will tell your wife and your son everything. Who you were. What you did. You will give them the choice you never gave us. He refused, of course. He begged. He cried. He called me cruel. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just opened my bag and slid a folder across the table. It contained copies of the mortgage notice, the bank statements, the photo of him with Daphne from before he'd even left us. You have 1 week, I said. If you don't tell them, I will. And I'll include the records showing how you hid assets during your bankruptcy. Your business, your house, it's all built on fraud. I stood to leave. A life for a life, Dad. It's only fair. He told them. I know because Daphne showed up at my apartment 2 days later, her face puffy from crying. She didn't yell. She just looked broken. Is it true? She whispered. All of it. I let her in. I showed her the box. The drawing. The proof. She sat on my couch and wept for the life she'd thought she had. She told me he'd spun her a story about a bitter ex-wife who'd taken everything and alienated his daughter. The poetic justice was perfect. Daphne left him. She filed for divorce, using the evidence I'd provided. She took half of everything, including the business, which she promptly sold to a competitor. His perfect, suburban life evaporated in an instant. That's how I ended up in his hospital room. He was alone. The business was gone. Daphne and Leo wanted nothing to do with him. He had nothing left to lose but his life. Why, Lila, he croaked, his eyes hollow. Why go through all this? You could have just said no. I finally pulled my hand away. Saying no was what you taught me. Walking away was your masterpiece. But Mom taught me that love means showing up. Even when it's hard. Even when it costs you everything. You failed her lesson. But I didn't. I stood up. Looking down at the shell of the man who had haunted my entire life. The tests were conclusive. I am a match. A perfect match. A flicker of desperate hope ignited in his eyes. "But I am my mother's daughter," I said, my voice soft but absolute. "And I will not give a part of myself to the man who destroyed her. Goodbye, Arthur." There was no scream, no rage, just a slow, silent collapse of the last shred of hope in his face. He finally understood the true cost of what he had done. I donated my kidney 6 months later. Not to him. I went through the National Registry. It went to a stranger, a teacher and father of 2 in another state. I received a letter from his wife, filled with a gratitude so profound it made me cry. I had given life, not as a weapon, but as a gift. I used part of the inheritance my mother had secretly scraped together to start a small fund that helps single parents facing financial crisis. I called it the Clara Grant. The man who was my father passed away a month after our final conversation. I felt nothing. And then everything. A quiet, profound peace. He didn't take a piece of me with him. He'd already taken everything he was going to get. He came back asking for a kidney. I gave him the one thing he'd truly earned. A consequence. You can run from your past, you can build a new life on its ashes, but you can't escape the truth forever.